I never allowed my daughter to enter the study. Not when she was 5 and curious. Not when she was 15 and rebellious. Not even when she turned 26 and told me she was old enough to know all my secrets. That room was the one boundary I never bent. The study sits at the far end of the hallway, behind a mahogany door that swells in the summer and groans in the winter. It smells of leather, dust, and something older than both legacy. Floor to ceiling shelves cradle first editions, signed manuscripts, annotated law books, journals dating back 3 generations. Every spine is a monument, every page a weapon. My daughter Claire used to press her ear against the door as a child. "What's in there, Dad?" she'd whisper. "History," I'd tell her. "And consequences." She'd giggle, thinking it was a joke. It wasn't. The study is where my father rewrote his will after his own brother tried to siphon the estate. It's where I uncovered forged documents that nearly cost us everything. It's where I learned that blood does not guarantee loyalty. Ink does. So no, Claire was never allowed inside. She grew up privileged, but not Nadvi. I made sure of that. She knew our wealth came from more than luck. It came from strategy. From knowing when to trust and when not to. And then she brought Daniel home. Daniel had the kind of smile that felt rehearsed. Polished handshake. Confident eye contact that lingered a second too long. He said all the right things about family values and entrepreneurship. He complimented the house, the artwork, the architecture. But he lingered in the hallway near the study. "Impressive collection," he said one evening, nodding toward the closed door. "Antique books." I didn't answer right away. I watched him instead. "Just old paper," I replied calmly. "I've always been fascinated by rare manuscripts," he continued. "There's serious value in that market. Some of those pieces could be worth life-changing money." There it was. Not admiration. Appraisal. Claire squeezed his hand. "Dad's protective of his books," she laughed. "He won't even let me inside." Daniel's eyebrow lifted slightly.
"Real even now?"
"Especially now," I said. He smiled again, but something behind his eyes sharpened. Measuring. Calculating. That night, long after they left, I stood in my study alone. I ran my fingers across the spines of leather-bound volumes that held more than stories. Inside those pages were trust agreements, property transfers, quiet clauses that protected what my father built and what I expanded. The world thinks wealth sits in bank accounts. It doesn't. It hides in details, in paperwork, in rooms no one is allowed to enter. And suddenly, for the first time in years, I felt the old instinct stirring. The one that whispers when danger is near but hasn't yet revealed its face. Daniel didn't want the books. He wanted what they represented. And if he was asking about the study, he was already thinking 3 moves ahead. The problem for him. I've been thinking 10 moves ahead my entire life. As I locked the study door that night, I realized something unsettling. The threat wasn't outside my family. It had just been invited in. The first real crack didn't come from Daniel. It came from my daughter. 3 weeks after that dinner, Claire showed up unannounced. She hadn't done that in years. She used to call first. She used to ask, "Dad, we need to talk." Those 5 words have never meant anything good in my experience. She stood in the foyer twisting her engagement ring nervously. Daniel had chosen something large, flashy, louder than her personality. That should have told me something too. We sat in the living room. She didn't look at me at first. "Daniel thinks it would be smart if I became more involved in the family assets." The phrasing was clinical, practiced. "Involved how I ask," she swallowed. "Transparency. Access. I'm your only child. Eventually everything will be mine anyway, right? Eventually." There it was. The word people use when they're tired of waiting. "Eventually," I said carefully, "is a long time from now." She hesitated, then pulled something from her bag. Paper. Folded. Legal-sized. I didn't take it immediately. I already knew what it was. "He just thinks it's practical," she rushed to explain. "A co-trustee arrangement. So if anything ever happened to you, there wouldn't be delays. No probate issues. No confusion." "Does he?" I asked. She flinched at my tone. "It's not about control, Dad. It's about security." "For whom?" The silence that followed felt heavier than any accusation. Finally, she met my eyes, and I saw it. Not greed. Fear. "Daniel says you've been secretive for years. That you don't trust anyone. That you keep everything locked away like we're outsiders. He thinks that if we're going to build a life together, we need clarity." Clarity. I almost laughed. What Daniel wanted wasn't clarity. It was leverage. I took the papers from her hand. "Draft trust amendment. prepared by a law firm I didn't recognize. It would make Claire an immediate controller of the estate holdings, shared signing authority, shared access to underlying documentation, shared power. You let him draft this? I asked quietly. It was his idea, yes, but you signed. She didn't answer. My chest tightened, not with anger, with understanding. Someone had been whispering in her ear, planting seeds, suggesting I was withholding, that I didn't see her as capable, that I was hoarding what should already be hers, that I didn't trust her. It was clever. Divide father and daughter. Step in as protector. Gain influence. Classic isolation strategy. Did he ask about the study again? I asked. Her eyes widened slightly. Yes, she admitted. He thinks that's where the master documents are. Of course he did. I leaned back slowly, masking the storm rising inside me. Daniel hadn't just been curious. He'd been mapping. And now he had my daughter delivering paperwork to my door. When is the wedding? I asked calmly. 3 months. 3 months. Plenty of time. I handed the papers back to her. I'll review it, I said evenly. Tell Daniel I appreciate his concern. Relief flooded her face. She hugged me before leaving, and for a moment I held her tighter than usual, because I could already see it. This wasn't about inheritance someday. This was about acceleration. And acceleration, when tied to money and power, is rarely innocent. After she left, I went straight to the study. I unlocked the door and stepped inside. Then I did something I hadn't done in 20 years. I pulled the old surveillance drive from the safe. If Daniel wanted transparency, I was about to give him a version of it he'd never forget. I didn't sleep that night. I sat alone in the study, the only room in the house that had never lied to me. The desk lamp cast a low amber glow across the spines of books my father once touched. Contracts, trust amendments, private letters, proof that loyalty, when tested, often fails. And now I had to ask myself a question I never thought I would. Had I already failed as a father? Claire's face kept replaying in my mind, not greedy, not malicious, but uncertain, vulnerable, influenced. Daniel hadn't forced her hand. He had shaped it. That realization cut deeper than any financial threat. I poured a drink I didn't need and stared at the trust amendment again. The language was careful, balanced, almost reasonable. Shared oversight, mutual consent clauses, protective provisions. But buried inside were small structural shifts, tiny adjustments that, over time, would tilt control away from me. Not immediately, gradually, like erosion. I ran my thumb across the margin where Claire had signed. Her handwriting was steady, which meant she believed this was right. That's what unsettled me most. If Daniel were just greedy, this would be simple. I've dismantled men like that before. Competitors, relatives, opportunists. But this was different. This involved my daughter's heart. And the truth is, love makes intelligent people reckless. I leaned back in my chair and closed my eyes, remembering when Claire was 8 years old and came home crying because a classmate had tricked her into trading her new backpack for a broken toy. She said it was special. Claire had sobbed. And did you check? I asked her gently. She shook her head. What did we learn? That people say what benefits them. She had learned it once. Now someone was making her forget. The rage inside me wasn't explosive. It was cold, focused, surgical. But beneath it, there was fear. Not fear of losing money. Fear of losing her. If I confronted Daniel directly, he would pivot, play victim, suggest I was paranoid, controlling, outdated. If I refused the amendment outright, he would tighten his hold on her, frame me as the obstacle to her independence. This wasn't just a financial maneuver. It was psychological positioning. And for the first time in years, I felt something unfamiliar, hesitation. Because revenge against a stranger is easy. Revenge that risks collateral damage to your own child. That requires precision. I stood and walked toward the bookshelf near the window. Behind a row of law journals sat a small, black-bound ledger, my father's private notes. Inside, one sentence was underlined in red ink. Protect the bloodline from external predators. But never let pride turn you into one. I exhaled slowly. That was the balance I had to strike. I couldn't let Daniel dismantle what generations built. But I also couldn't destroy my daughter's faith in me while doing it. The emotional battlefield was no longer outside these walls. It was inside me. And the more I replayed Daniel's subtle comments, the way he studied the hallway, the way he calculated market value of old paper, the clearer something became. He believed I was just an aging gatekeeper standing in the way of access. He had no idea I was evaluating him the same way he was evaluating my estate. By midnight, The guilt had hardened into resolve. I wouldn't confront. I wouldn't argue. I would observe. And when I moved, it would be with evidence, not emotion. Because the worst mistake you can make when someone is manipulating your family is reacting before you understand the full game. Revenge, if rushed, becomes self-destruction. So I didn't rush. I invited Daniel to dinner, just him. Claire hesitated when I made the call. "Is everything okay?" she asked. "Of course," I said smoothly. "It's time I get to know the man who's about to marry my daughter." Daniel arrived precisely on time. Navy suit, confident smile. A bottle of wine expensive enough to signal respect, but not so expensive it looked desperate, calculated. We sat in the dining room, but I made sure his chair faced the hallway, the study door visible at the far end like an unanswered question. He noticed. His eyes flickered toward it twice before the first course was finished. "So," he began casually, "I've been thinking more about that trustee arrangement." "I assumed you would," I replied evenly. "I just believe in modern transparency," he continued. "Families fall apart when information is centralized. Or," I said, cutting into my steak, "when information is mishandled." He smiled. "That's why shared oversight works. Mutual accountability." There it was again, language polished enough to sound virtuous. I leaned back slightly. "Tell me something, Daniel. What interests you more, the books or what's inside them?" For the first time, his expression shifted, just slightly. "I don't follow. You strike me as someone who studies value?" I continued calmly. "Market trends, asset classes, appreciation curves." He relaxed again. "I do my homework. I'm sure you do." Silence stretched between us. Not hostile. Just heavy. After dessert, I stood. "Come with me." His pulse quickened. I could see it in the way he straightened. I walked down the hallway, unlocked the study door, and stepped aside. "5 minutes," I said. His breath almost caught. He entered slowly, like someone stepping into a vault. He moved toward the shelves, fingers hovering near spines, but not quite touching. His gaze wasn't sentimental. It was scanning, cataloging. "What an extraordinary collection," he murmured. "Some of these first editions alone."
"Yes?"
I interrupted softly. "Alone." He turned toward the desk, toward the locked drawers, toward the safe hidden behind framed certificates. And then he made a mistake. He walked directly to the third bookshelf on the left, the one that concealed the false backing panel. He didn't know it was false, but he knew something was there. He pressed gently against the wood, testing. I watched carefully. "Looking for something specific?" I asked. He stepped back instantly. "Just admiring craftsmanship." Of course, I smiled faintly. What Daniel didn't know was that the study had been rewired 2 weeks ago. Motion sensors, micro cameras embedded discreetly within smoke detectors and bookends, audio capture integrated into the ceiling molding. And tonight's invitation wasn't about trust. It was about confirmation. I closed the door behind us as we returned to the dining room. "You're protective," he said lightly. "I respect that." "I imagine you do," I replied. After he left, I returned to the study and reviewed the footage. There it was. The moment his eyes locked onto the concealed panel. The subtle shift in posture, the calculation. He hadn't stumbled upon it. He'd expected it, which meant one thing. He'd either done research, or someone had told him where to look. My jaw tightened. There were only 2 people alive who knew about that panel. My father and me. Claire had never been inside, which meant Daniel wasn't guessing. He was fishing with a map he didn't fully understand. And now I knew something critical. He believed the real power wasn't the books. It was the documents hidden behind them. He was right, just not in the way he thought. The first move in any strategy isn't destruction. It's repositioning. Daniel thought he was closing in on hidden documents, on leverage, on control. What he didn't realize was that the documents he was so eager to find had already been moved. 2 days after our dinner, I spent 6 quiet hours inside the study dismantling the illusion. The false panel, emptied. The original master trust, transferred to a private vault under a holding entity no one outside my attorney and I even knew existed. What I left behind was something far more valuable. A decoy. Meticulously prepared duplicates, convincing but flawed. Clauses subtly adjusted. Signature lines real but linked to conditional triggers buried deep in secondary agreements. If someone attempted to file or act on them prematurely, it wouldn't give them control. It would expose them. Paper can be a trap if you design it that way. A week later, Claire invited me to dinner at their condo. Daniel greeted me warmly, but there was a tension beneath his smile, an impatience. He believed progress was near. Halfway through the evening, he made his play. "I've been thinking," he began casually, pouring wine. "It might be helpful if Claire had at least partial document access before the wedding. Just so there's no confusion about logistics." I looked at Claire. She seemed uncomfortable, torn. "That's reasonable," I said calmly. Daniel blinked, surprised at my agreement. "In fact," I continued, "I've already prepared something." I watched the relief wash over his face. Too quickly. The next afternoon, I delivered a sealed envelope to Claire. Inside were copies of the core structural documents from the study, specifically the ones from behind the false panel. I made sure Daniel was present when she opened them. His hands didn't touch the papers immediately, but his eyes devoured every line. "This is very comprehensive," he said, voice measured. "Transparency," I replied softly, "like you suggested." That night, the cameras inside my study captured nothing, because the real surveillance wasn't in my house anymore. It was in theirs. You see, I hadn't only moved documents, I'd retained a digital forensic firm, quietly, legally. The Decoy paperwork included embedded trace identifiers, unique formatting signatures that would alert my attorney if copies were scanned, modified, or submitted to any financial institution. I wasn't waiting for Daniel to confess. I was waiting for him to act, and he did. 10 days later, my attorney called. "Someone attempted to initiate a structural amendment using your duplicate trust formatting," he said evenly. "Filed electronically. It's sloppy, but ambitious." My chest felt cold, not shocked. Confirmed. Daniel hadn't just wanted security. He had tried to accelerate transfer authority before the wedding. Without my knowledge, without my consent. Using documents I willingly provided. He believed he was clever, moving quietly, creating leverage, positioning Claire as co-controller under the guise of preparedness. What he didn't know. The amendment attempt triggered an automatic legal review clause in the real trust, one that froze any structural changes for 90 days pending investigation. He had just locked himself out of the very system he was trying to access. And he had done it on record. I didn't confront him, not yet. Instead, I called Claire. "Have you and Daniel filed anything recently?" I asked gently. She hesitated. "No, why?" "Interesting," I replied, because now the question wasn't whether Daniel was manipulating her. It was whether she even knew. And the most powerful weapon in a betrayal is proof. The confrontation didn't happen in my house. It happened in mine. 3 days after the attempted amendment, I invited them both to the study. This time there was no hesitation when I unlocked the door. Claire looked uneasy. Daniel looked composed, but there was a stiffness in his posture that hadn't been there before. We sat across from each other at my desk. I didn't raise my voice. I didn't accuse. I simply placed a single document on the table. A printed confirmation from my attorney's office, time-stamped, logged. Attempted structural modification request, submitted electronically under formatting identical to the documents I had provided. Daniel didn't touch it. Claire did. Her hands trembled as she read. "What is this?" she asked softly. "That," I said calmly, keeping my eyes on Daniel, "is an attempted acceleration of estate control." Claire looked up, confused. "Acceleration? An early structural adjustment," I clarified. "Filed without my authorization." Daniel exhaled slowly, as if inconvenienced rather than exposed. "This is a misunderstanding," he said evenly. "I was simply exploring options. Planning ahead. Planning ahead," I repeated. Claire turned to him. "You said we weren't filing anything." His jaw tightened. I said we weren't finalizing anything. The difference between those two words hung in the air like smoke. I leaned forward slightly. "You used documents I provided in good faith." "They were given to Claire," he replied quickly. "She has a right to understand her future." "And you have a right to manipulate the timeline," I asked. Claire's breathing grew shallow. "Daniel, did you submit this?" Silence. "Then, I was protecting you." That sentence. Every manipulator hides behind it. "I saw the hesitation in your father," he continued, voice firm. "He doesn't trust you with what's already yours. I was ensuring you wouldn't be left powerless if something happened." Claire stared at him like she was seeing a stranger. "Be filing legal amendments behind his back," she whispered. "It wasn't behind anyone's back," he snapped slightly. "It was procedural." I stood slowly, measured. "You accessed structural authority without consent," I said. "You attempted to alter governance before marriage. And you did it using documents you believed were original." His eyes flickered. There it was. Believed. "Those weren't the originals," I continued. The color drained from his face, just slightly. The amendment triggered a protective clause in the real trust. Any premature modification freezes structural authority and initiates legal review. Claire looked between us. What does that mean? It means, I said quietly, that someone tried to move too soon. Daniel's composure cracked for the first time. You set me up, he said, low and sharp. No, I corrected. I gave you opportunity. Claire stood abruptly. Daniel, you lied to me. He stepped toward her. I was securing our future. Our future, she echoed, voice breaking. Or your access? The room felt smaller now, tighter. Daniel's mask was slipping, not explosively, but undeniably. You think he's protecting you, he said to her. He's controlling you, keeping everything locked away like you're a child. I watched her carefully. This was the moment, not about money, about alignment. She turned toward me, eyes glossy but steady. Dad, she asked quietly, if Daniel hadn't filed this, would you have ever given me access? Yes, I said honestly. When you were ready to protect it, not rush it. That answer mattered, because control and protection look similar from the outside, but intent defines the difference. Daniel scoffed. This is paranoia dressed up as wisdom. No, I said calmly. This is experience. Silence settled like dust after a collapse. And for the first time since he entered my life, Daniel looked uncertain. Because he had expected anger, he had expected chaos. He had not expected evidence. And he certainly had not expected Claire to step back from him. The silence after confrontation is louder than the argument itself. Daniel didn't storm out that night. He recalibrated. That's what men like him do. Claire left with him, but she didn't hold his hand as they walked to the car. That detail mattered more than anything said in my study. For 48 hours I heard nothing. Then Claire called. Her voice was different. Not shattered. Not hysterical. Dad, she said quietly. How long? How long what? How long have you known? I didn't pretend. Since he asked about the study. She exhaled slowly. He told me you humiliated him, that you trapped him. I did, I replied evenly, but only after he tried to move pieces on a board he didn't understand. There was a pause. He says you never intended to trust me, she continued. That the Decoy documents prove you were testing us. I was testing him, I corrected gently. Not you. Another silence. Heavier this time. He admitted he filed it, she said finally. He said he panicked. That he thought if he didn't secure something before the wedding, you'd restructure everything to cut us out. There it was. Projection. Claire, I said carefully, did I ever give you a reason to believe I would disinherit you? No. Then why would he? She didn't answer immediately, because the answer was obvious. Fear is easiest to manufacture when someone benefits from it. I asked him if he would have told me after it went through. She whispered. And he said it wouldn't have mattered. That it would have been in our best interest. I closed my eyes for a moment. The phrase manipulators use when they remove your agency. Our best interest. Not yours, not mine. Ours. 2 days later she came home. Alone. No engagement ring. No dramatic breakdown. Just clarity. He's been pushing since October, she told me while sitting at the kitchen table. Asking about asset structures, suggesting prenup revisions, saying we should modernize things before we're legally tied. Did you agree? I asked. Sometimes, she admitted, because he framed it as teamwork, as building together. She looked up at me then, eyes rimmed red but steady. I didn't see it as him positioning himself. I saw it as him planning a future. That's because you were planning a marriage, I said softly. He was planning leverage. She nodded slowly. He got angry when I told him I needed space. She added, not hurt, angry. That distinction was everything. By the end of the week, the wedding was postponed. By the end of the month, it was canceled. Daniel didn't disappear quietly. He threatened legal action at first, claiming emotional damages, lost deposits, reputational harm. But when my attorney sent a formal response referencing the attempted amendment filing, the tone shifted. Predators prefer easy prey. Litigation against documented evidence is not easy. Eventually, he retreated. But consequences rarely end cleanly. Claire struggled not financially, emotionally. She wasn't grieving the money. She was grieving the illusion. And that kind of loss lingers. One evening, she stood outside the study door again, like she used to as a child. I think I'm ready, she said quietly. I looked at her for a long moment before unlocking it. Because this time, the door wasn't about protection from her. It was about protection with her. The day I finally let Claire into the study, the room felt different. Not smaller, not weaker. Shared. She stepped inside slowly, not with curiosity this time, but with respect. Her fingers brushed the spines of the books like they were fragile artifacts, instead of locked mysteries. "So this is it," she said softly. "This is part of it," I corrected. I walked to the third bookshelf, the one Daniel had tested, and removed the volumes concealing the false panel. I pressed the hidden latch and let the wood shift open. Inside were not just documents. There were letters, handwritten notes from my father, amendments in his own script, warnings, corrections, lessons passed down in ink instead of conversation. Claire stared at them quietly. "You kept all this from me," she said, not accusing, just processing. "I kept it safe," I replied. I handed her the real master trust document. She didn't reach for it immediately. "What makes me ready now?" she asked. "You're not asking how to control it," I said. "You're asking how to protect it." That was the difference. Revenge had never been about destroying Daniel. It had been about revealing him. And revealing him without destroying her trust in herself. I sat at the desk and opened one of my father's letters. "When I was your age," I told her, "your grandfather trusted his brother blindly. By the time he realized the betrayal, half the estate was legally redirected." Her eyes widened slightly. "He recovered it," I continued. "But not without scars!" "And you?" she asked. "I learned to see ambition before it calls itself love." She nodded slowly. The silence between us wasn't heavy anymore. It was honest. A week later, I amended the trust, but not in the way Daniel had hoped. Claire became co-trustee under a staggered authority structure. Not immediate control, not symbolic access. Structured responsibility, education, oversight, shared review meetings with our attorney, transparency with accountability. When she signed this time, she understood every clause, every safeguard, every trigger, and she didn't rush. Months passed. Daniel attempted one final reach, a quiet proposal through a mutual contact suggesting reconciliation. Claire declined. No anger, no dramatic speeches, just clarity. Predators lose power when the illusion collapses. One evening, as we sat in the study reviewing portfolio statements together, Claire looked at me thoughtfully. "Did you ever feel guilty?" she asked. "For testing him," I replied. "For testing me." I considered that carefully. "Yes," I admitted. "But protecting you sometimes means allowing you to see the truth yourself." She leaned back, absorbing that. "I'm glad you didn't just tell me," she said quietly. "I wouldn't have believed you." That was the final lesson. You can warn someone about fire, but until they feel the heat, they don't step back. I locked the study that night, but not out of secrecy, out of tradition. The door was no longer a barrier between us. It was a reminder. Legacy isn't just wealth. It's discernment. And revenge, when done right, isn't destruction. It's revelation. Ending, final reflection. Daniel thought the study held power. It did, but not the kind he understood. The real inheritance wasn't money. It was wisdom earned through betrayal. True protection isn't control. It's teaching someone to recognize danger before it smiles at them.